A legacy isn't something you inherit. It is something you forge through years of struggle, sacrifice, and an unwavering iron will. Watch the epic tales of those who dared to leave their mark on history. Click subscribe now and help us build a lasting legacy together.
Bought my parents a cottage on the Oregon coast for their 40th anniversary, and the morning I drove up to surprise them, my mother was sitting on the front step, crying into a dish towel, and my father couldn't make his hands stop shaking. My sister's family had moved in. Her husband came down the porch steps toward my dad, jabbed his finger at the road, and said, "This is our place now. You can go." My sister stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and that little half smile she's worn since we were kids, the one that says she's already won. She kept smiling right up until I stepped out of the car. Then nobody said anything at all. My name doesn't matter much to this story. What matters is that I'm the older sister, the one who fixes things, and I have been since I was about 8 years old. I'm 31 now. I'm a forensic accountant, which is a fancy way of saying companies pay me a lot of money to find where the other money went and prove who took it. I'm good at it because I learned a skill at home before I learned it in a classroom. I grew up listening to my parents whisper argue about the gas bill after they thought we were asleep. I learned what a final notice looked like in pink ink. I learned the specific sound my mother made when she opened the mailbox and found something she'd been dreading. I don't sleep much. I get up before it's light, and I have saved almost every dollar I've ever earned because some part of me is still 9 years old and still bracing for the lights to go out. 3 weeks ago, my parents hit 40 years married. 40 years of my dad picking up double shifts at the cabinet shop and my mom cleaning offices at night so I could go on the 8th grade field trip. And so my sister could have braces and dance lessons and, later, a great many other things. I wanted to give them one place in the world that nobody could take, where the worst sound in the morning would be gulls, instead of a phone ringing with bad news. I found a little gray-shingled cottage tucked back behind the dunes, 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a kitchen window that looked straight out at the water. It needed a new roof and the porch sagged, but it was solid in the bones. $410,000. I closed on it in a trust, set up the taxes to draw automatically for the next 20 years, paid 2 years of insurance up front, and left a bottle of the cheap pink wine my mom secretly loves on the counter with a card that just said, "For the quiet years, you earned them." I told no one, especially not my sister. Let me back up, because I need you to understand the shape of my family before I tell you how I took the whole thing apart in a single afternoon. My sister is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, she was the bright one, the charming one, the one teachers wanted to believe in. Somewhere along the way, bright turned into she's still finding herself. And finding herself turned into a pattern I could chart on a spreadsheet because I have, in fact, charted it on a spreadsheet. There was the wedding we mostly paid for. The honeymoon they deserved after such a hard year. The food truck that lasted one summer. The MLM with the leggings and the candles and the protein shakes. The car I co-signed and then quietly paid off when the repo notices started. Her husband, Trent, has had 9 jobs in the time I've had one. Every time something fell apart, it landed on me, because I was the one with the steady paycheck and the inability to watch my mother cry. My parents helped in their own quiet, devastating ways. Mom would drop off extra groceries she accidentally bought too much of. Dad would slip my sister gas money out of his wallet at the door, glancing back to make sure I didn't see. The whole family ran on one unspoken law, and the law was, you know how your sister is. You know how she is. Be patient with your sister. She's sensitive. You're the strong one, sweetheart. You always have been. I put myself through school on instant oatmeal and 2 jobs and wired money home from a campus computer lab at 1 in the morning because the power company didn't care that I was 20 and broke. At some point, I stopped being a daughter and a sister and became a line item, a revolving credit line with a face. So when I bought the cottage, I built it like a vault, because vaults are what I know. I put the deed into an irrevocable trust with my parents, named as the only lifetime beneficiaries, with language that gave them the exclusive right to live there and gave no one else any claim at all. I made myself the trustee. I funded a small account just for upkeep. I changed every lock and kept the only spare keys in my safe. When I held those keys in my hand for the first time, I felt something in my chest unclench that I hadn't known was clenched my whole life. I told my parents a week before the anniversary. I drove them out on a Sunday without telling them where we were going, and when we came around the last bend and the cottage appeared with the ocean behind it, My dad went completely still. He walked the whole place slowly, running his palm along the porch rail, the door frames, the edge of the kitchen counter, like he was checking whether it was real. My mom opened every cabinet and just stood there breathing. We sat on the steps and watched a heron stand in the shallows for what felt like an hour. It's yours, I told them. All of it. Forever. Nobody can take it. My dad tried to say something and couldn't. My mom finally whispered, "It feels like I can finally put something down that I've been carrying so long I forgot it was heavy." I stayed that first night and slept on the little couch by the wood stove, just to be sure the heat held through till morning. It did. I drove back to the city before dawn to close out a fraud case I'd been buried in for months, feeling, for once, like the world was balanced. But broken systems hate a clean room. My sister called my mom 2 days later. She'd seen a picture. My mom, bless her, had posted a single photo to Facebook, a sunset over the water, no caption, just because she was happy. My sister asked where it was. My mom said vaguely, "Oh, just a little getaway." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because my sister's husband knows how to pull location data off a photo, and by the next afternoon, they had the exact address. They showed up the following morning with a packed minivan. 2 kids, a dog, and enough luggage for a season. My mom called me, her voice already thin. "They just wanted to see it," she said. "Now they're saying they'll stay a few days to help us get settled." I told her it wasn't a hotel. She said, "We'll sort it out when you come," which I have learned over 31 years is my mother's way of saying, "Please come fix this." I can't say no to her, and you know I can't. By the time I got there on Saturday, it had stopped being a visit. My brother-in-law had a tape measure out and was talking about which wall to knock down. My sister had her clothes in the master closet. There was a listing. He'd put the cottage up as a vacation rental that very morning. My parents' new home, photos and all, with a calendar already filling up for the summer and the payouts routed to an account I would later confirm was his. When I walked in, he was mid-speech, telling my father that the stairs were dangerous at his age, that the upkeep was too much, that they were young and could manage the property, that this was really for everyone's benefit. My mom was trying to get a word in. My dad was sitting in the corner chair with his hands gripping his knees, doing that thing he does when he's furious and trying with everything he is not to show it, the small tremor in his jaw. This was a man who worked 16-hour days breathing sawdust so his kids could have things he never had, and he was being erased in the one place that was supposed to be his. I set the bakery box I'd brought down on the counter, very gently. A coffee cake, which felt suddenly absurd. When I spoke, my voice came out flat and quiet. The voice I use in conference rooms when I'm about to show someone exactly how much I know. "Who gave you permission to list this house?" My sister's husband rolled his eyes. "Come on. Family property is family property. We're all in this together." My sister chimed in, sweet as antifreeze. "We're not asking, hon. We're just telling you the plan." My mom said, "Sweetheart, please. Can't we just talk about this nicely?" And then my brother-in-law pointed at my father again and said, "He can talk about it from the guest room. Or from that apartment of theirs." Something in me didn't snap. It clarified. It went very cold and very orderly, the way it does at the end of a long investigation when all the numbers finally line up and you can see the whole crime at once. "Everyone? Living room. Now," I said. It wasn't loud. People who are used to bullying always assume a quiet command means they're being invited to perform. So my brother-in-law sauntered over, smirking. The kids looked up from the tablet. My sister's smile flickered for the first time. I opened my bag and laid 4 documents on the coffee table, lining them up square, the way I line up exhibits. I tapped the first one, the deed, recorded with the county. This cottage is owned by a trust, and the only people with any legal right to live here are sitting in that chair and standing by the stove. My parents. Their right of occupancy is exclusive. That word means something specific. My brother-in-law squinted. "And what's that supposed to mean for me?" "It means you don't have the right to a key," I said, "let alone a wall to knock down." He laughed, short and ugly. "Try and stop me." I tapped the second. "The trust document. I'm the trustee. That makes it my legal duty to protect this property and the people who live in it, and it specifically authorizes me to remove anyone who threatens their peace here." That's not me being dramatic. That's the instrument. My sister's voice went tight and saccharine. "You're being insane. We're family." I slid the third page across. It was a color printout of his rental listing, the photos of my parents' home, the calendar, the booking rules. This went up this morning. Using photos of a house you don't own. Advertising overnight stays. The payout account ends in the same four digits as yours. I checked. I watched that land, and there's the small matter, I said, sliding the fourth page, a copy of the Homeowners Association rules with one line highlighted, that short-term rentals are flatly prohibited here. The fine is $10,000 and it comes with the association's right to take legal action, which I would, as trustee, be obligated to cooperate with. I leaned in, both hands flat on the table. So here is what happens now. You take the listing down, you pack, you apologize to my parents for what you've done in their own home, and you leave. My sister threw her head back and laughed, theatrically. Or what? You'll sue your own sister? No, I said. I'll do my job. I set my phone face up on the table. There was an email open on the screen, drafted and ready, addressed to the head of the HOA board with the trust documents and the listing attached. Behind it, a second email to the rental platform's fraud department. Behind that, a text to a man named Cal Reyes, a retired deputy I'd hired that morning to sit in his truck at the end of the lane and wait for one word from me. My brother-in-law stared at it. You're bluffing. You've known me my whole life, I said. Have I ever once bluffed about money? My sister grabbed my mother's arm. Mom, tell her to stop this. This is insane. This is family. My mom looked at her. Then she looked at me, and her eyes were still wet. But something underneath them had gone hard and clear. Something I had never seen in my mother in 31 years. Do what you have to do, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't take it back. That's when my brother-in-law's face curdled. He pointed at the chair where my father sat. Get the old man up out of my seat. I stepped between them. My hands were perfectly still. You will not speak to my father that way in this house again, I said, very softly. And the only person walking out that door is you. You have 20 minutes to pack, or Cal will be glad to help. The room went dead quiet. My sister tried one last angle. You're a monster, she hissed. You're blowing up this entire family over a building. I let out a long breath. I'm done paying for the wreckage you two keep leaving behind. That's not blowing up the family. That's the first no I've ever managed to say to you, and I should have said it a decade ago. My brother-in-law lunged for the papers, as if tearing them up could undo a recorded deed. I just gathered them, slid them back into my bag, and looked at my dad. Would you like to sit in your living room in peace? He swallowed and nodded, just once, and managed, yes. Then the doorbell rang. Cal, right on time. It took 2 hours. They escalated the way people do when they've never once faced a consequence. My sister wept loudly while she folded clothes, performing for an audience that wasn't watching. Her husband paced the yard making phone calls, telling someone on the other end about his rights. The kids carried armfuls of toys to the van looking confused and a little scared, and I felt bad about that, I really did. Cal, who is about 6'4" and built like a retaining wall, simply stood by the door with his hands folded and watched, and said nothing, and that was enough. I didn't argue with any of it. I made my mom a cup of tea and we sat at the kitchen table. I should have just told them no at the door, she said, turning the mug around and around. They came in so fast. They kept saying it would be easier for us. No maintenance for your father. A place for the grandkids. They said they were taking care of us. They were taking care of themselves, I said. The maintenance is the part that makes it yours. She nodded, slow and sad. My dad sat out on the porch looking at the water. When I went out and sat beside him, he said, I thought I'd be stronger than that. I should have thrown them out myself the first day. You called me, I said. That was the strong thing. While they packed, my sister cornered me in the kitchen one last time, her face arranged into wounded sincerity. You know what this really is, right? You think money makes up for the fact that nobody actually likes you. You buy things so you can control people because you don't know how to just be one. I bought our parents a home, I said, very evenly. I didn't buy you a debit card. Her face dropped the mask. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I said, is that it took me this long. When the van finally spun gravel out of the driveway, the quiet that came down over the cottage wasn't empty. It was full. I walked through the rooms picking up juice boxes and a forgotten sock, and in the guest room, I found a spiral notebook on the nightstand. My brother-in-law had been doing math. Projected rental income, wildly optimistic. The kind of numbers only a man who's never run a business writes down. And in the margin, in my sister's looping handwriting, a note to herself: if dad digs in, just get mom going. She always caves. I closed the notebook and put it in my bag. I keep evidence. It's a reflex. That evening, my dad took my hand on the porch and said, I don't know how to thank you without feeling like I failed you both. You didn't fail anybody, I told him. You taught us how to be a family. We just got confused, all of us, about what that word was allowed to cost. We ate the coffee cake straight out of the box for dinner, watching the sun go down. My phone started buzzing. A text from my sister: you made mom cry. I'm done with you. A text from her husband: lawyer will be in touch. An email from an address I didn't know with the subject line: what kind of person does this to family? I turned the phone over and finished my cake. Before I left, I installed cameras, the kind that send alerts to a phone, and I wrote the login in big block letters my dad could read without his glasses and put it in a folder on the counter labeled Cottage, along with copies of the deed and the trust and the HOA rules. Boring paperwork. The most loving thing I own. My mom hugged me at the door and said, I'm so sorry it had to be this way. I'm not, I said. It had to be exactly this way. The following week was a master class in how my sister works. She launched a campaign online. My rich sister stole our parents' retirement home so she could keep it all for herself. She posted old photos of the three of us as kids, captioned to break your heart. Her husband shared articles about elder abuse and financial control. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years started sliding into my messages with concerned little paragraphs. Hey, just checking in. I heard some things. I wrote exactly one response, and not to any of them. I sent a single email to my sister and her husband, copying my parents' financial advisor. Polite and brief and cold as the ocean in February. 2 points. 1. All communication about the property would go through me, in writing. 2. They were formally notified that they were not to come onto the property, and that any attempt to do so would be treated as trespassing. Then I built a filter that routed every email from them into a folder I would read on my own schedule, if ever. I was not going to win by outshouting them. I was going to win by being the one person in the family who could not be exhausted into folding. 2 days later, the real thing happened. My dad called, and I could hear the panic. They're here. They've got a paper. They're saying we signed something. They're saying it gives them the right. I had been waiting for this, honestly. I told him to go inside, lock the door, and not say a word. Then I called Cal, who called the county sheriff to request a civil standby, and I pulled up the porch camera on my phone. There they were, my sister and her husband, waving a document at the front door while he shouted. I took a screenshot. The paper was a power of attorney, supposedly signed by my father, supposedly granting my sister authority over his affairs and his property. The signature looked nothing like his. It looked like a person trying to remember what his signature looked like. And here's the thing about my actual job, the one I do all day, every day. I find forged documents, and I prove they're forged for a living. I sent them both one text. It had the screenshot of their fake power of attorney attached, and a link to the state statute on forgery of a legal instrument, which is a felony, and one sentence: a deputy is on his way. I'd be in the car before he gets there. Their van was gone in under 2 minutes. That was the line, it turned out, that even they understood they could not walk back. There's a difference between a family fight and a crime, and they'd just stepped over it. The smear posts came down. The concerned cousins went quiet. The emails stopped. They had spent their whole lives confident that I would absorb whatever they threw, because I always had. They genuinely thought this was an argument they could wear me down in. They never understood that to me, it had become a case file, and I do not lose case files. 2 weeks later, I drove out to the cottage on a Saturday with no emergency at all, just to be there. I tightened the loose railing on the porch. I helped my dad hang a bird feeder he'd been wanting. My mom made pancakes, and we ate them while she complained about the gulls that had figured out how to steal them right off the plate. Nobody said my sister's name. Her absence in the room wasn't a wound. It was just clean air, the kind you don't notice until you've been breathing smoke for years. After breakfast, my mom put her hand over mine on the table. I'm going to call her, she said, and my stomach dropped for a second. Not to make up, to tell her that what she did was wrong, and that until she can look your father in the eye and apologize to him and to you, she is not welcome out here. My dad cleared his throat and looked at his coffee. I should have taught her that a long time ago, he said. I taught you both to work hard. I never once taught her how to hear the word no, without it being the end of the world. You taught me to be loyal, I told him. I'm just figuring out, kind of late, that being loyal to this family was never supposed to mean betraying myself to do it. A month after that, my nephew texted me. He's 16 and mostly communicates in one-word replies and shrugs, so I nearly dropped my phone. The cottage looks really nice. Grandma seemed happy. I wrote back before I could overthink it. You're welcome anytime. Ask Grandma. There will be pancakes. He sent back a single thumbs up, and I sat there looking at it for a while. A small plank, laid down across open water. A bridge can start with one board. Last night, after a deal kept me at the office for 3 days straight, I didn't drive home. I drove out to the coast instead, and I didn't even go in. I parked down the lane and looked at the cottage through the dark. The windows were lit and warm. I could see my dad in his chair with a book and my mom at the table working a jigsaw puzzle. The dog they finally got asleep at her feet. The little gray house looked solid and safe and completely beyond anyone's reach, exactly the way I'd built it to be. Here's what I understand now that I didn't before. The thing I'd spent my whole life calling love was mostly just money thrown at a fire that was always going to keep burning, no matter what I fed it. Real love turned out to be quieter and a lot more boring. It looks like good locks and a recorded deed. It looks like a power of attorney that holds up when a person's character does not. It looks like finally letting your parents rest and letting everyone else understand, clearly and in writing, that you are not the safety net, you are not the rainy day fund, and you are not the one who shows up to mop the floor after they flood the kitchen on purpose. I'm the daughter, the one who learned to count when she was too young, who turned that into a career and, eventually, into a wall around the two people who deserved one. If my sister ever wants to stand on that porch again, the door is right there. She knows where it is. She can come holding an apology instead of a demand, as a daughter instead of a landlord. Until then, the cottage stays. The cameras watch the dunes. The kitchen window faces the water, and my parents are finally, after 40 years, at peace. A gift isn't really a gift if you have to bleed your own quiet to give it. And drawing a line around the people you love was never me locking the family out. It was me, at long last, deciding who gets to stay.